Lizza Monet Morales, and I am so excited to be here. This is Conciencia Talk, brought to you by Conciencia Collective and mitu. Super pumped to be back. As you know, this is now our second season, and we have another jam-packed show today. And it is a bit of a serious issue, but one thing that we know that at Conciencia Talk that we've really established is that we need to hold space to have serious conversations and keep it 100 with each other, because that's really the only way that we can bridge disparities and really come to a better understanding of things. So in that, we invite you all to watch, to share this. If you haven't already on your feed with others, invite them to join us. And if you're watching the replay, welcome. Feel free to also leave a comment down below for your opportunity to be featured during the show, especially if it's a question. And even if it's the replay, feel free to leave a comment, because our guests and myself will be returning to check it out. So without further ado, I do want to touch base with today's topic, which is all about police brutality. As we know, this year has been a reckoning, if you will, for Black Lives Matter in particular. But that impact hasn't just impacted the Black community, it's also impacted the Brown community. And one big thing that we've talked about at Conciencia Collective since the very beginning is that we are partners in this fight. Black and Brown communities need to really come together, not just as allies, but to stand in unity for one another, because the way that our populations are actually being targeted by the police and those that hide behind a badge is really gone to a point where not only is it just not acceptable, but it's ridiculous. Lately, if you just saw what's been going on with Breonna Taylor, that, if anything, has re-sparked the energy of everyone after the whole movement got a kickoff earlier this year after the murder of George Floyd. So I am very honored to be joined today by some amazing women who have a viewpoint, who have been using their platform and their voice to stand up for our community. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our musical artist this week, which is Jullian Hervey from Lion Babe. Hi, Jullian.
Hi, how are you?
I'm so well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm in New York, and it's officially fall. And there's so much happening. So I'm happy to talk about it and be here.
So actually do talk to us about that. Before we show your quote, tell us, why was it important for you to use your voice, and be so adamant about the movement?
I think, well, we have one of our first songs we ever put out called Jump High. We got to sample Nina Simone, and she's always said that an artist's responsibility is to be responsible and be in the times and respond to the times and reflect the times. So, I think in my journey of just becoming a musician and my womanhood and definitely embracing more of my Black heritage and just kind of connecting and meeting people in my life that share my experience, I've just found that it's really valuable to bring all the outside stuff into your art, into your creation, and especially at this moment, I think just in the pandemic and the level of really just injustice that we see in all experience, that it's crucial to be able to bridge the work that you do every day and try to somehow find a way to interject, what is going on. So, everyone has a different role to play, but I think just through my response and how I need to be, that's what I do. I try to put in my art and, just try to funnel, whether it's funds and helping people or just raising awareness. Like, if I have a voice and I have a platform, I feel a responsibility to just help light the fire, really. So I'm just here to kind of be a conduit.
I love how you talk about light the fire. And one of the things that you said so accurately, which is something that I talk about a lot, is being an artivist. I really think, as an actor and a content creator and producer myself, and as an activist, I really feel it's important to bridge our voice and in the art that we do with our activism. So I love that that's exactly what you've been doing. And actually, there's a new song that you actually wrote that you've partnered with the NAACP. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. I mean, I wish I could say I wrote it, but I did not write it. It's a Mos Def cover, actually. And, I just think growing up, we're such diehard fans of just all of these Black artists that I grew up with in the 90s, like Miseducation, Lauryn Hill, is really exactly where we are now. We're like all learning about really our lives, our government, our systems in this way. And I think as a little girl to hear it and feel some way, and then now to circle back and see like, whoa, these are even more deep-seated issues. It's just crazy to know that artists have always been able to give you that bridge to teach you a lesson, to tell you something in their own unique way. And so that song really, when we were just all struggling with the amount of Black lives and amount of people of color that have just been suffering, that was just a song I was listening to feel better. And I think just the more I listened to it, the more I was like, this is right now. You know, I want to birth a new life into this message, because I love how this is
That makes a lot of sense. I think I might have lost you, but hopefully we got you back. Gotta love the internet sometimes. Oh no, I think you might have frozen on us. There you are. You're back. You're back. You're back.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, it's okay. It's okay. It's just the internet likes to play games. It's fine. But I do appreciate so much that you took, again, something that you heard and that inspired you, and you decided to double down and figure out how can you actually bring it not only back to light, but also use it as a way of paying it forward and really putting love in action. So how did the partnership with the NAACP come about?
I hope I'm not still frozen, but yeah, basically, you know, just for it being the message that it was, and just us being who we are, we were like, it feels weird to kind of monetize off of this, especially at this time, because our efforts are trying to like move things. So really just talking with family, and I went for even like my mom and dad, who I know have done a lot of activist work growing up in their careers, and I was like, you know, where do you think it makes sense to start to donate? And my mom showed me this talk that Sherilyn Ifill had said, and she's, you know, just so well spoken, so articulate, and I was just really moved. And we were both just sitting there with coffee, watching her for like 20 minutes, and then just having a in-depth conversation about race, which, you know, is definitely, I think, newer in a lot of families. And yeah, it just felt like the right fit. And I just loved her clarity and her understanding of kind of the ways that she can actually make change within our laws, and really getting in the courts and making things happen. And that's how I felt like, you know, that really is where it starts and ends with the laws. That's how we're being controlled. That's how the people in power stay in power. So that's where the funds need to go to help, you know, fight them.
I appreciate that, because it was very synergistic, and it's something that you definitely obviously put a lot of thought into, much like the quote that you submitted to us here at Conciencia Collective. So I'd actually love to speak a little bit about the quote. What inspired this as well? I mean, you've talked a little bit about it, but I also love how you really get into the political aspect as well as the economic aspect.
Yeah, I just think the more I just grow up as a businesswoman and, you know, carving my own way and just how I envision things, you know, you can't really, you can view and make up a bunch of things, but in the end of the day, you're going to have to look at, you know, how can you get funding? How are you supported? What normally supports this kind of situation? And, you know, what can you do? And in this situation, obviously, when I was young, I grew up around like predominantly all white people. So what I was taught about and what I talked about was definitely never about kind of this disparity. And, you know, I was even in my mom being Vanessa Williams, it was kind of like, I knew that if I had gotten pulled over, they know I'm the only Black girl in this town, and they probably know not to mess with me because, you know, my mom will find out, or this and this. So I knew that I had a protection, a level of just difference from people that I know. If like me and my dad were driving up to the Adirondacks or something, he would get pulled over by a state trooper like almost immediately because he's in a car.
Really?
Yeah, because he's in a Porsche or something. You know what I mean? So those kind of things, which I know happened to people, it did happen, and it was especially happening more, I think, to my dad than it was to my mom. So I was always aware that I had so much more to learn, and I also just wanted to learn because I always felt that I wanted to connect with what's really going on, and where, you know, how are the people that I really, especially now living in New York City, see every day, like what are their lives like? And obviously I've been now in the city for 10 years, so I feel very different than I did growing up in that little town. But it's really just about supporting the communities that have given me so much life, like being in Brooklyn and going But my dad now lives in Harlem. It's just like, I want to help the people that inspire me and that are around me. And yeah, that's what I do.
I so appreciate though that you've called out your own privilege and that you know and you recognize that, because some people try to act as if it isn't a thing, right? But I think it's so important in our Black and brown communities to be able to know that, right? And so I really appreciate you calling that out. Another queen who's really good at calling things out and also is actually nominated by the NAACP is my girl, my fellow queen in arms out in the streets, is Miss Kimberly Latrice Jones. So Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure.
I so love that you're here. So Kimberly, I know you heard a little bit about Jullian's experience, even with police brutality, and I just want to jump right in it. Have you yourself had, especially being the mother of a son as well, police brutality experiences that you feel have been scarring? Because one of the things that has been really interesting to me this year is how many people want to downplay to other people of color, like, it's not that bad, that doesn't happen anymore. So I would love for you to set the record straight from your experience of what you've gone through.
Well, you know, besides the fact of all of the people who I know who have stories, right? I can't even begin to tell you all the people that I know that have stories that I could tell. I myself twice have been a victim of police brutality. And it's funny, but because when we talk about what's going on in this movement, we don't realize, as we're saying Black Lives Matter, that we're not actually talking about Black lives, we're talking about Black deaths. Because if we actually get into the Black lives that matter, then you have to talk about the daily indignities that happen to Black people at the hands of the police. I have a 14-year-old son. When my son was about 6 weeks old, I had a police officer pull me over. A lot of extenuating circumstances, but basically the registration on my car wasn't up to date. But I'm a 6-week-old in the car who I just brought home from the hospital because he was preemie and had been in the incubator the entire time, which is why I hadn't had a chance to update things like my registration and stuff. And so, you know, cause to pull me over, but then the question is, was there cause to pull me over? Because in order to know that I didn't have proper registration, you had to run my tag. You had to have cause to run my tag, and you didn't. But you did, because it is commonplace in marginalized communities for officers to get behind you and run your tag to see if you have, you know, missing insurance or anything like that, because that's how they make budget, is in marginalized community. Yeah. So pulled over, and to make a long story short, because I want to tell you both stories, but this is the most horrific one, which is why I always tell it first. Through a series of events that happened in this, what should have been a routine stop, where they should have really, the law is that they could have like towed my car and wrote me a ticket. That should have been the extent of what happened. I ended up being handcuffed on the sidewalk, and he took my baby's carrier out of the car and set it in traffic. My 6-week-old.
Oh my God.
Kimberly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So as I sat on the sidewalk in cuffs, screaming for him to please bring my baby's carrier to me, it was a white officer that was doing this and was writing his ticket and going about his daily business. Because what happened was I pulled over on a very busy street here in Atlanta. And so when he took my baby's car out of the carrier, out of the car, which for what? Exactly. Like, I don't know for what. I don't know for what. He set it against the tire. But he set it against the tire on the side of traffic. So Memorial Drive, which is a super busy, cars are whipping by, and I'm watching my baby's carrier rock. So I'm screaming for him to bring my baby over to me. And what ended up happening was another police officer pulled up, a Black officer, pulled up behind him, started talking to the guy, asking like, what's going on? Do you need assistance? The guy says no. He looks down, he sees my baby's carrier. He picks the carrier up and he comes and sits the carrier next to me.
Oh, thank God.
But then he gets in the car and leaves. So
this is what gets me so frustrated, because when people say like, okay, all cops aren't bad and they can help, I'm like, where are the good cops? Okay, then fine. Where are the good cops? I need you to show up, and not just show up and just be like, oh, I did one thing and now I can go. Like, show up and take control of the situation and say, this nonsense needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. That is so crazy, Kimberly.
Yeah. So that was the first incident. The last incident happened 2 years ago. Again, I was in the car with a girlfriend of mine. We were in a infamous area here, Cobb County, that is like Black folks and Latin folks don't need to be there after dark still.
Yeah.
And so we're in Cobb County, and I dropped a friend of mine off, and had another friend of mine in the car, a friend of mine who's Latina, and we're in the car, and all of a sudden blue lights, and I'm like, okay. So I pull over. Of course, and by now I'm like, you know, I have PTSD already from the incident that happened years ago. So I keep driving until I find a gas station that's like lit. So I pull over. Basically what it was like he was going to get the double whammy. He had a black girl and a brown girl all in one take, right? So we pulled, me and my friend Jessie Esparza, she's an amazing artist. We pull over into the parking lot of gas station so that I could see that it's lit and everything. And he walks up to my car. Now reflecting back, I remember hearing a tap on my car. So I talked to someone I know in law enforcement after the incident who told me that that's one of the oldest tricks in the book. If you don't have just cause to pull someone over, you hit the roof, you hit the trunk of their car, and it'll send the light out over their license plate. And then you can say, I pulled you over because the light above your license plate is out. Really, he was pulling us over because it was night in Cobb County, a black girl and a Latinx girl. And so, but now in retrospect, I remember hearing that knock. He walks up to the car. He says, you know why I pull you over? I said, no. He says, the light above your license plate is out. And I said, oh, I didn't know. In any other circumstances, all he needed to write was a warning about that.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that's reasonable for that, right? He says, no, he's going to write me a ticket. He takes all my information. So as he's asking for my information, my friend Jessie goes to hand me my purse, because what's the first thing he's going to ask for, right? Is an ID.
Yeah.
So I go into my purse to get my ID out. He draws his gun on me and says, that's the kind of stuff y'all do that make us nervous. I can still hear that, him saying that, like it just happened.
I'm so triggered by that. Like literally,
He says, that's the kind of stuff y'all do that make us nervous. So then I put my hands on the steering wheel and I say, you know what? Then you just tell me what to do. And so he says, I need to see your license and registration. I said, my license is in my purse and my registration's in the glove compartment. Do I have your permission to get them? He says, yes. So I give him all my stuff. He goes back. He's running it. We're in the car now for 20 minutes. And I'm looking at Jessie and I'm like, says something ain't right. I don't know what's going on, but something ain't right. And then all of a sudden I see 2 more police cars pull up with 2 officers in each one. So now 4 more officers are approaching us. So as these 4 officers are approaching us, he comes back to the window and he goes, ma'am, I'm going to need you to step out of the car. And I'm like, for what? And he's like, you have a warrant for your arrest. So what happened was we had a tropical storm here in Georgia in which courts were shut down. So I had basically like a bench warrant, a failure to appear warrant for an appearance that was supposed to happen in the middle of a tropical storm that never happened. And they had apparently sent like a letter to the address that was on my license, which was the address that I no longer lived at, to reschedule the date. I had thought I paid the ticket online and that it was like over with or whatever. So there's a bench warrant and he can see what the warrant is for. He can see that it's for an unpaid $75 moving traffic ticket because he tells me this. But yet you felt you needed 4 more people?
Hello?
You needed 4 more people for that? So I get out of the car. He walks me behind to the back of my car, and the other officers walk up and they surround me, all guns drawn. All 5 of them now have guns on me. So I'm standing there and one is telling me to get on the ground. One is telling me to put my hands behind my back. One is telling me to put my hands up. And finally, I don't move. And I just say, I'm hearing a lot of directions. Can one of y'all just please tell me what to do? I just need one person to talk to me. I'm the civilian. Why am I de-escalating the situation? So I asked them if just one person can tell me what to do. And in the midst of that, they throw me on the ground. It scarred my face. They throw me on the ground. They hog-tie me. They put me in the car. Now, all of this has happened. He explains to me that it's for a bench warrant. He tells me what it's for. So I'm like, with all of that, you knew that I was not a danger to you or anything. So then I'm trying to figure out why we're not pulling off. I'd already given them permission to let my friend Jessie take my car, so they didn't tow it. He comes back with her information. I'm like, what is going on? He runs her through ice.
Wow.
Stop it. Kim, stop it. Oh my gosh. Okay, wait. So this is getting good. I don't know if to scream, pull my hair, punch someone, I don't know what's happening. But I want to make sure that we also have our other guest, Kim, because I see her backstage also making faces. And also I feel like she's ready to jump in. So we have Kim, we're blessed with two. So we have Kim Tignor with us today. Sis, jump in this conversation. Are you hearing this?
What? Wait, I want to Kimberly finish. I'm sitting in the back,
That's what I'm saying. I was like, have her finish, but I wanted you in here because I'm like, what is going on? So he runs ice, and then what happens?
He runs her through ice. She is not illegal. So she is, although people can't be illegal, let's be clear about that.
Undocumented. I will say undocumented. Yep.
Yeah. And so he runs, she's not undocumented, so he runs her and gets nothing. You know what I mean? And then he takes her information back. And after that, they take me to jail. The jail that they took me to didn't have a women's holding cell. So there's me and 4 other women. They put us in a men's holding cell. And the only thing so the way that this holding cell is set up, it's a bunch of chairs in a row, like schoolyard looking chairs. And so they, there's all these chairs for the guys, and then there's another side that has all the chairs for the girls, and there's 4 or 5 of us, and there's 200 men. And so all that happens is there's a row that separates their chairs from our chairs, and about every hour a sheriff comes in and goes, girls don't talk to the guys, guys don't talk to the girls.
Because that's really going to control things. Oh my gosh.
And that's all there is. So they knew they knew they arrested me illegally.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, they knew they arrested me illegally. So what they ended up doing is, as they were trying to get their story together, they didn't process me. So I sat in there for 24 hours unprocessed, which means nobody could find me. It was like if they could have killed me and nobody would have known, because I was nowhere in the system. The only thing that was in the system that I was arrested, but there was nowhere that I had been processed. So people couldn't find, my friends who were with, Jessie, who was with me, she couldn't find me. My co-author, Geely, is a lawyer. She couldn't find me. My ex-husband had my son. He couldn't find me. Nobody could find me because I hadn't been processed for 24 hours. And I had been sitting up in a chair for 24 hours in a men's holding cell.
So you bring up such a great point here that I actually want Kim to also jump in, because that is one of the things that we've seen consistent with your personal experiences, consistent with my personal experiences with police brutality, and what we've seen with so many things that have happened is that due process that we're supposedly supposed to get literally goes left in the situation. So I'm so grateful that, for one, you definitely got out of jail, obviously, and I want to hear how that happened. But Kim, Tignor, I'd love for you to jump in too, because you deal with so much with IP, but from just a legal perspective, and then with the work that you do, working with creators, and also working to, I would say, break down stereotypes that people make about creators as well. What are your thoughts on what you've seen with BLM?
I mean, so I guess for me, what moves me so much about even this panel and this group that you've assembled, which I'm so grateful for, is this. So I'm a lawyer, right? I'm a lawyer. I'm a policy person, and to listen to me talk is boring as hell. I sit here. Oh my God! Did y'all see the piece that Kimberly did after George Floyd?
Monopoly. We're going to get there to the Monopoly analogy. Yes.
Kimberly, she's one of those storytellers that literally has you do you know what I'm saying? I'm there. No, it's not, but it's a gift. You know what I'm saying? And it's Jillian, it is about uplifting our storytellers and rebuilding that bridge between the folks that are in the courtroom, which is why I'm so Sherilyn Ifill. I am at the altar of Sherilyn Ifill right there with you, Jillian, right? She is brilliant, and she can be brilliant in the courtroom. She can be brilliant on the Hill, but it's the talents of these ladies to be able to tell the stories and bring the direct impact. To me, without that bridge and that connection, we're not getting anything done. And so, I mean, just to even, I mean, I can still see your baby sitting in his, do you see it? And it's just the humanity of it. It is, and these are the police reform issues that we're dealing with, right? It's that, why is it that these folks were supposed to serve and protect us? They don't even see us. They don't see us as humans. They don't see us as the folks that they're supposed to protect, right? And it's how do we get those moments like those? And you tell me the man moves the baby's car seat, and it's like this glimpse of humanity, and then he's gone, right? And it's just that to me that's what sickens me about every story. You know, look at that tape, and it's like that man does not see George as the husband, father, brother that he is. He didn't see him as a human. Do you see? And so that's what moves me so much when I hear these stories. And if we could start thinking about policy and putting that at the center of it, I feel like that's when we start bringing true change. So, you know, again, like I just am so appreciative of this sister circle because it just, any time that we can do anything to just lift up the stories and our storytellers.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head, and this is why I knew you all would have some stories, and I really wanted to tie it in because it's a weird thing. I was just in DC last week. I went to the private memorial for RBG, and as you all know, that has just really rocked the nation and really put us in a really precarious situation with the current administration even more, which we'll get to with some of the comments that came out of the debate this week. But one of the things that I noticed while I was there was right on the Hill, and I'm sure you see this, Cam, there was BLM shirts and Black Lives Matter shirts and RBG, Honor Her Words, all these things. But it had become this misnomer almost of like, that's them. I don't know anyone that's happened to. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Right. And so it's almost in a weird way. I've seen this happen with Andres Guardado. I've seen it happen with Vanessa Guillen. Same thing with George Floyd, with Richard Brooks, with some of these people, Breonna Taylor, where people are like, oh, that's a name, like almost in death because they become famous. People have lost the humanity behind it. And I'm like, no. I need you to understand they were still real people that still need justice. And to that end, they are actually symbolic of other Black lives that are being lost. And I still have chills from that. Kimberly, that you nailed it and you claimed it and you named it, that it is. We're talking about Black death. And that includes Latino death and Afro-Latino death as well, right? And that is something that we really need to make sure that stays at the forefront. And we don't let ourselves get distracted whether someone gets COVID or doesn't, that is running this country right now, or if there's other things, right, that come up, because it's a sad day when something like that can now detract us from the issue. So I really want to put that out there. I'd love to know what your viewpoints were. Earlier this week, we know the presidential debates happened, and the man currently in office, Trump, that lives there, he refused to denounce white supremacy and instead doubled down by giving a shout out to the Proud Boys and asking them to stand back and stand down and stand by. And then the next day pretending to not know who the Proud Boys were. He continues to do this gaslighting thing so well and flip-flopping. But I would love to know from the three of you, what did you feel when you heard that? Because I know for us, it didn't sit well.
Wine.
Man, you're so smart.
It's Friday. Well, first I felt very Black.
Hey!
Because I knew at that moment, obviously just there's these talks and you're like, really, am I going to be part of a generation that experiences some type of, what does it look like as a civil war now? Like, I swear that's where my head went, because it's basically, obviously we all talk about how much he's been, participating in dictatorial behaviors, campaigning, all of this stuff, and you hear it and you're like, okay, I don't want to be influenced, but just the way that we were even talking about how Black death is normalized.
Oh no, I think she froze on us. Come back.
Yes, especially.
Let's see if not, we'll come back to her when she unfreezes. At least she looks good though. There you are. Okay. The way you said, the way that we normalize Black death.
Yes, is also the way we're normalizing Trump's behavior. I mean, he's become so outlandish that we're like, no one's triggered anymore. So even in that speech, in that moment, I found myself being like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe I'm hearing him say this, but I'm also, why am I surprised? And so
oh no, the Wi-Fi.
Yo, the internet.
This happens. It's okay. Do me a favor. If you have a phone near you that's on Wi-Fi, will you turn it off? That might actually help your Wi-Fi signal.
I'm gonna do it now.
Yeah, so you do that, and then while you do that, Kim or Kimberly, I would love for you all to also respond to this week's comments.
I mean, I wasn't surprised.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like, this man is, I cannot say I was surprised, but it is constantly, the gaslighting is like spot on, right? Well, this man will like literally break the law right in front of you. And then when you say, oh, you just broke the law, he'll be like, how could I have broken the law? I did it right in front of you. I didn't do it. I didn't break the law. This has been like the last 4 years has been this whole game of gaslighting and, you know, the dog whistling of the ugliest and the unearthing of like the ugliest sides of this country. I mean, and you know, and listen, y'all saw the announcements today. As far as the coverage goes, leading up to the announcement of him having COVID, I mean, there was all this talk about how the entire, you know, nobody was really wearing masks at the debate. They were saying that, you know, they've been downplaying this entire, you know, pandemic. And it's just, to me, it's so frustrating because really, when we look at it, it's Black and brown bodies that are getting like we're the ones that are like suffering and hurting the most from this entire thing. And so, you know, I'm watching him being evacuated off to Walter Reed, but then I just keep thinking about all of my people who are slipping through the cracks, who are either A, not being able to access a hospital bed, who's not being able to be transported to any sort of facility, who are too scared to be able to go to any of these places for fear of not being able to cover bills or anything like that. I mean, it is our bodies that are going to be punished and take the root and larger end of this pandemic. And yet here's this man who is out there telling us it's not that big of a deal. And then the second that he does test positive, all of these resources and services open up to ensure his safety. But then it's the folks who really need it the most who are locked out from these systems. Like it's sickening. And to me, that's the darker side of it. The stuff that he says, like, I am no longer holding my breath or hoping that this man will show up as anything other than what he is and what he's going to put forth. But when you really think about like the repercussions of him, you know what I'm saying, to open up the economy quickly, irrespective of where we are and whether or not right protections are in place for the folks who have no choice to go into those spaces, whether or not they are or not safe, like those are the bodies. And we're the ones that power all of these economies. Like underneath, we are the ones that are powering the entire thing. And it feels like these folks don't even care whether or not we live or die. So, you know, that is, you know what I'm saying? Like that is what, when I see no one sitting on your side of the debate in masks, none of y'all are wearing masks, but I know that my tax dollars are going to go and pay your bills and you get evacuated over to Walter Reed. Like that is the stuff that like makes it hard for me to sleep.
Right. No, and I think just there's so many implications on what that looks like and if this is a political strategy, right, which I know that we can talk about for days, but what I really want to focus and draw in on is how it ties into police brutality, because he continues to defend police and whatever they have to do at all means to supposedly keep the looters in control. And it has been turned on us that by us expressing our constitutional right to really protest, that now has put so many people in danger, even when they're out there protesting. And so it's now extended into a new category of police brutality, in addition to the day-to-day stuff like what Kimberly was talking about, what any of us have to deal with. We now even have to worry that when you're out expressing your constitutional right, it has literally become the civil war that Jillian was talking about as well. So Jillian, does that, you know, frustrate you, or do you feel like, is there any way out from that, or where are we in that reckoning that you see?
I mean, I really think everyone deals with how they choose to express the change in their own ways. And, you know, like I said, if making art is my outlet and actually like going inward and creating music, that's one way. But I completely support and understand that some people, the movement has to be on the streets and they have to go protest and they have to physically be there to make change, you know? So everyone has to do what they have to do. And it's not surprising that, you know, the only reason everything is getting heightened is because the issues are becoming more and more, you can't hide behind them. You know, it's literally everywhere in every facet of our lives. like you were talking about it, we're the current, we're the thing that keeps everything moving. And when those people are getting hurt the most, you know, the whole system is falling down. And I think there's just so many things in the world right now that are heightening this and making us forcing us to, you know, deal with this issue. So I feel that you can't really stop protesting as crazy as it is. You know, I was just watching a old documentary, and they were quoting James Baldwin, and he was saying how, you know, America, as much as you want it to be the land of the free, that's really not the reality here. It's not the land of the free, but it is the home of the brave. And I thought that was just really powerful, because it's like, as much as we are being always led to fear and to always think that we have our limitations, our whole thing, and even with police, it has to change by being brave and standing up against it, you know, because the way that they feel powerful is because it's been taught since the beginning of their training, you know. And I think that's just the world right now, and how humanity is kind of suffering because of it. It's sad that we don't get taught compassion, and you don't get taught how to view and protect people through your words first. You know, I think the fact that we become so weaponized is it's sad. It's just really sad, really, you know. But I think you just have to keep fighting in whatever form you can, you know.
I love that you brought up, you know, where we are in the state of the world, because here's the unfortunate thing. Black Lives Matter, and really asking for Black lives to matter. And like I continue to say, until Black lives matter in this country, Latino lives cannot matter. We'll continue to be invisible. Our children will continue to be put in cages, and will be continued, you know, to be treated as second-class citizens, because again, we are partners in this fight. And so many of the freedoms that we've gotten, we really have gone on the backs of pioneers as in Black Americans that have really held space, not just for them, but for others to come along and be involved. And so I appreciate that you talk about the state of the world, because what we've seen is that BLM isn't just an issue now here in the United States. It's gone worldwide in a very big way. And unfortunately, on the same day that George Floyd was murdered here, Anderson Arboleda, I don't know if you've heard of him, in Colombia, he too was killed by police because he was violating curfew orders and not, you know, adhering to social distancing rules that they had put into place. So it's crazy that it was the same day, just, you know, different time zones apart. But what does that say, right, about the same state of the fair, where Black lives are not being respected in a way where you're easily just thrown into the fray if you're not following every single rule? Oh, we have Kimberly back on with us. That's Kimberly. We were just talking about, there you are. We were just talking about Anderson Arboleda, who unfortunately was also murdered on the same day as George Floyd, and how important it is that we're using our voices, but also recognizing the fact that this isn't just an issue here in the United States, but it's happening all over Latin America and frankly, all over the world. So I'd love your thoughts with that as well.
Yeah, it's unfortunate too that there are so many cases like his that kind of get like buried underneath. But it's funny because I was talking to a couple of MPs in the UK, and they were telling me how they have similar issues, and how it's particularly directed at people who have West Indian lineage in the UK, more so than people who transplant from Africa. But it's mostly people who are like kind of like native Brits who've been there multi-generational, or who specifically those who have like a West Indian lineage. So in those communities, in the communities that are, you know, populated by West Indian people, they have extreme issues with police brutality that nobody was talking about, that got kind of like swept under the rug. And that is why you saw such an outburst in the UK around this, is because this has been an issue that they've had that they just didn't talk about, that it was just not like polite to talk about. And so now this, seeing us in this space of the uprising that was happening here in the US gave them the strength to do it. And I think very, very soon we're going to see that happening in Latin communities, because it is a major problem. Like I said, when I told my original story, like that's how I felt that night. Like he felt like jackpot. I got a Black girl and a brown girl. I got a twofer in one night. And so it is a serious issue. And I've been working, especially a really dear friend of mine, Jose Lozano, who is the son of Rudy Lozano in Chicago, has been working with the Latinx community there because they have a severe problem with police brutality in the communities there, in the Latinx communities in Chicago. And so I'm hopeful. And sis, you and I got to work on some projects about this. I have a really good friend, fine artist named Ernesto in LA that I've been working on.
Ernesto's great. Ernesto's awesome. I love him to pieces. Yes.
Yes. Ernesto is my buddy. That's like my little brother. So I have some Black and Brown initiatives, but I'm also a board member for the Indigenous Peoples Movement, which works a lot with people in the Chicano movement around these types of issues. But yeah.
I love to see it though, because that's exactly what we talk about here, you know, on Conciencia Talk, and even what Conciencia Collective is all about is, again, finding ways that we can be bridges for each other and really come together as partners. Afro-Latinos really also need people to hold space for them, because in our community, oftentimes, if you are Afro-Latino, you're not Black enough or you're not Latin enough. And it's like, no, you are enough being who you are. We all have to come in together. And let's just keep it 100. The slave ships stopped in Latin America before they got here. So like we all have that running through our blood. And so one of the things that we talk about even is in our community is colorism, and calling that out, because there is so much colorism, and that has been part of the issue with even police brutality, because I've seen it with my own eyes when I've been out at marches, whether it is for Andres or Bordado, who was Salvadorian, unfortunately, and was killed by being shot in the back by police. He was unarmed. He was at work. We're dealing with that nonsense out here in LA. We had Sean Monterosa up north, Eric Salgado, same thing. And it's interesting to me where people are like, oh, but okay, if it's brown, then maybe I'll show up. But if it's Black Lives Matter, that's not my fight. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is your fight. All of these are your fights. What do you mean? And they're like, no. And that's where we really have to bridge that gap. So I love what you're doing, Queen. You know it, because it really is holding space for all of us to come together and recognize that we're on this team together. We're actually on the menu. So we really need to figure out how to flip the game. And I want to hold space right now for your Monopoly analogy, if you will, or the one that you shared with everyone, because for those who haven't heard it, I think that that's such an empowered way for people to understand in a bigger sense what it is that's at stake here. So would you care to share that with everyone at home?
Yeah, it's the basically what the analogy boils down to is that systemic racism has had a ripple effect and has, rebranded itself periodically throughout the times. And so that's the part that we have to recognize, that we don't, and not having recognition of that, of not being honest about the history, then it's very difficult to understand the why things are happening the way in which they are happening, because instead of people being focused on the what, I said in my Monopoly analogy, imagine that for nearly 300 rounds, which would be the equivalent of the nearly 300 years of us being enslaved people in this nation, that you played a Monopoly game, but you didn't get to play. And that you kind of did get to play, but you had to play on the behalf of your opponent that you're playing against. So all the wealth that you build for 300 rounds goes to them. You assist them in amassing this large amount of wealth. And then upon your release, and you start to play the game for another, probably 70 years, when you're talking about Reconstruction and Jim Crow, then when you're playing, if you get too far ahead, then they like burn your game, which is what happened in Tulsa and Rosewood. And they're actually I've been studying them now because I'm working on a documentary about it. There are actually over 100 massacres similar to Tulsa that happened in the U.S. against Black people. Over 100. And those are the documented ones. So I'm not talking about one person with murder. I'm talking about a slaughter where hundreds of people, sometimes in some cases thousands of people, were murdered by angry white mobs in towns like Tulsa and Rosewood, where Black people had built economic wealth. And then
I was just going to say, if we turn it up on that particular point, not only were they murdered, but like, even let's talk about Emmett Till, and we'll bring it to Breonna Taylor from then to now, is that people will confess that they murdered a Black human being, and still be let go. So that, again, is this disrespect, and goes back to this Monopoly game where it's like, yeah, well, that game piece didn't matter. I still want to play my game. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. And so when you look at that in terms of economics, if you just look at the economic piece of it, what you're talking about is a society that's been able to build wealth on the backs of marginalized people and not having to reconcile with that. So when you talk about, when I look at white Americans saying, well, Black people are just looking for a handout, what, you mean the same handout that you got as a nation? Because between 1926 and 1965, the U.S. government underwrote $200 billion for home ownership. 98% of that went to white America. 2% of that went to the rest of us, because they understood that home ownership was the fastest way to build generational wealth. And so a lot of that money was spent in suburbs where there was actual documented laws that didn't allow Black and brown people to participate in that great movement that the great generation participated in, particularly the World War II veterans. When you look at the GI Bill and how there was language in there that prevented Black soldiers from benefiting in the same way that their white counterparts benefited. So when you're talking about, and then don't even get me started on redlining. I tell people that all the time to showcase grace towards Black businesses, because this person is probably starting that business with their savings or their 401k, because their community have been redlined in a way that they don't have access to the same starter loans that their white counterparts have. So they're starting their businesses at a disadvantage. They're starting their businesses deeply in the red in a way in which other people aren't. So maybe they don't have cups this time. Showcase them some grace. You go to McDonald's every time and the ice cream machine doesn't work and you return. You go to a Black business one time and they don't have a plate, and you like become the town crier to tell everybody not to return. And so we have to showcase each other grace. But how difficult is it to do that when you don't know the true history? When the history is being taught into our schools, to our children, every day is misinformation. You know how many people I hear tell me we never got our 40 acres and a mule? You know what that tells me when they say that? They don't know the history that we actually did get our 40 acres and a mule, and that there was a worse fate that happened, which was it was taken back. Through the Freedmen's Bureau, General Oliver Howard, which is what Howard University is named after, was given a bureau to assist people, formerly enslaved people, into assimilating back into American culture. And what happened was he wasn't given enough funds to actually run that bureau, but what he was given was 850,000 acres of land, which he started to distribute to formerly enslaved people, and they started to actually build wealth. And then Lincoln was shot, and Johnson took office, and Johnson utilized that as a moment to have a bargaining chip with Southern whites that he wanted to get back into the Union. And the first thing he did was reverse that, take all of that land back from the formerly enslaved people and give it to those planters who had to go and basically get a personal pardon from him to be accepted back into the Union after they were parts of the Confederacy. And then he made a law which is still affecting us today, called a vagrancy law, which is part of the Black codes that are still affecting us today on the law books. He made a vagrancy law, which is basically the grandchild of the 13th Amendment that is the root of mass incarceration. So the through line never ends. I'm writing a whole book about the through line.
Queen, come through. I see Kim, like my legal background too. I'm like, yes, speak on it. Yes, so if you're at home, feel free to tweet about it. If you're watching it in the replay, feel free to take notes, because you should use them with people and educate them, because that is an issue. I mean, you're even speaking on it. Trump, again, even himself said how he wants to change how history is taught. What are you talking about? You cannot change, oh my gosh, with their colonizer education. One of the things that I've seen and that I've heard is in some schools in the South, they're teaching different reasons as to why the South and why the Civil War happened, and that it wasn't over slavery. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
They teach that it was an issue of states' rights, which is actually ridiculous, which is why one of the first things that we have to attack is education. But this is why, and I constantly speak to people about the Freedmen's Bureau, and the reason that I do that is because that is my hope and goal, is that we will reinstate the Freedmen's Bureau and let it actually do what it was originally planned to do. Because when you look at all the prongs and the tiers, and to where Black people are disenfranchised, disadvantaged, have been brutalized, and what we're talking about when we're talking about racism and systemic racism, what we're talking about is a white supremacist notion that's backed up by the law. That's why you can't talk to me about reverse racism. Because if I wake up tomorrow and decide I'm going to be racist and don't like white people, which I couldn't do because that means I hate my grandma, and I don't. But if I woke up tomorrow and started that, I don't have a fully functioning 3-branch system to back up my racism.
Right.
People do. That is why they have this white supremacy delusion, is because the entire system is built around
feed into it. And so the only way in which we are going to combat it at this point is, I think, is to reinstate Freedmen's, because the prongs of which we need to make correction for African-American people, from healthcare to home ownership to education. And the thing that pisses me off, and then I'm going to get off my soapbox, the most about education is public education as we know it was put in place by the 13 Black lawmakers that were in office after Reconstruction. So Black people basically created public education, and now we have an educational caste system that means we get education based on taxes, which means the poor get a poor education and the rich get a great education. And so we have so many things to dismantle: the emotional trauma, the medical disparagements. Black women are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth. When you talk about the economic disparagements, when you talk about home ownership and redlining, and the fact that Black homes are appraised at 4 to 20% lower than their white counterparts, even if the neighborhood and the median income is completely matched. So it's so much to do. We need an entire bureau to address it. And the reason we need a specific plan for Black people is because there are specific laws on the book, and this is a specific system that was designed to keep us enslaved, held back, and it's still working in the same way. And that through line is the most key thing, because police brutality is just the grandchild of slave catching, because policing is the grandchild of slave catching.
And that, I mean, literally come through just with all of it. I mean, mic drop and go. But it is so, you hit it. And this is actually what I wanted to ask Kim, if we're looking at it also from a legal perspective, to talk about exactly what you said. A lot of people don't understand that policing actually started because it was a slave catching. And so, Kim, I would love it for you, as obviously also from a legal perspective as a lawyer, to even talk about how some of the ways that we've seen it in modern day. Before we get to Brianna, I'd love to even talk about Central Park 5. We've seen it. And ironically enough, Trump himself is even involved with that mess. You know, I know Raymond and Santana and a couple of them, but I would love your viewpoint, again, of this through line that Kimberly's talking about, how we've seen it and continue to see how all those things are actually tied to police brutality.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk about I want to start with Breonna Taylor, right? And the outcome when that, grand jury announcement was made. And it's like the announcement came out. I was heartbroken, but I wasn't surprised. And I guess what kept going on over and over in my head was Audre Lorde's. Her quote has just been on my mind a lot, with the concept of the masses' tools will never dismantle the masses' house. And that is the problem, because the Supreme Court basically created this concept of qualified immunity, right? Which is why they were unable to bring charges up against these police officers. These, again, are rules that are built by white supremacy. These are rules, the entire House, the rules, all of it, that just create these hurdles for us to hold folks accountable. And so it's the idea of, we need to get rid of these tools, because we're dealing with the wrong tools if we want the right outcomes. And so, I mean, to talk about Kimberly's metaphor of monopoly, because that, I'm telling y'all, I watched that video. I couldn't breathe. I'm just like, this woman is saying all that is on my mind. And then you add to that metaphor the idea of, for each round, we're talking about healthcare disparities, where we're handing down high blood pressure, diabetes. They're just, and y'all know it. You got uncles, you got aunties who all have these preconditions. We are preconditioned to have all of these problems. You talk about where we live, the air we breathe, we are predisposed for asthma. We are predisposed for all of these things. And then for a pandemic to come, right? And basically shine a light on all of these things that have been handed down to us with each round of Monopoly that we've been forced to play. And while we're playing this game of Monopoly, we're also being forced to build these structures that, with the filibusters and what requisites there are for us to vote, and all of these impediments, right, that make it that much more difficult for us to even get inside the house, inside a master's house. It is mind blowing, and it's this moment that has really shined a light on all of the layers of ugliness that we have in this country. And I guess, so I'm going to use this to talk a little bit about the initiative that we've started, which is called She Will Rise. It is pushing for the first Black woman to sit on the Supreme Court. It is to recognize the erasure that Black women have faced, it is to recognize that we are one of the most engaged demographics, and yet we are the most underrepresented as far as in any three branches of this here government. And it's to also recognize, though, that it's that erasure, it is that exclusion that makes us so good at being inclusive, right? And recognizing who is not there and whose perspective is being missed. And so that is why we're really pushing to say that, you know, it is time for the first Black woman to sit on the Supreme Court. It is time for us to be seen, you know, and to feel like, you know, how is it that we're supposed to feel like we are to get a just outcome at the Supreme Court if we can't even see ourselves in it? And so, you know, if we want to talk about issues like housing, issues like qualified immunity and police reform, things like privacy, Fourth Amendment rights, you know, the threshold for when a police officer can approach us, all of those things, that is doctrine that's created on the Supreme Court. And it's just, you know, right now, y'all need to understand what's going to happen on the Supreme Court in the next session and just how much is at stake, because the Affordable Care Act is for dinner, y'all. Like, it is up and they're trying to take it down. And I really need y'all to marinate for a second on the fact that they're trying to get rid of our access to quality health care when it's Black and brown bodies that are dying during a pandemic. And it just goes back to what I was saying earlier, where it just really feels like these folks are living recklessly. They're letting this pandemic go on and on and on. And it just constantly is this reminder that they don't care about us. And so it's time for us to get engaged. It's time for us to get upset. And I mean, it's not even like we haven't, but we just have to keep continuing to fight. Because there's just so much on the line right now, y'all. Like, these are going to be some of the most important months of our entire life. I believe that this vote, this vacancy that's coming up, this is the stuff that's going to be impacting like our great grandchildren. So I'm gonna step down from my. No,
not at all. This is so great. This is exactly what we love. But I love that you said that it's time to vote. And that is actually, I wanted to ask about the concept of having, you know, the first African-American woman on the Supreme Court is amazing, because again, we know what representation does. That is why the loss of RBG really is hitting so many of us, because she came first as a woman. She definitely was there to really protect rights in so many of these landmark cases. But what we're seeing, unfortunately, with the current suggested nominee, that quite frankly is coming at a legal time, because we're in the midst of an election when people are already voting.
200,000 people have voted. Like, it's
exactly. That is bananas to me. Like, and then you're going to go into lame duck. And for those at home, if you don't know, if let's say by chance, through the grace of God, that Trump is not reelected and we move forward with this election, in that period between him and getting inaugurated, it's a lame duck session, right? So major laws should not be passed. And if he's pushing to pass someone, that is an abuse of power. And it goes back to what Kimberly was saying earlier and what Kim said, and even Jullian, what we've said. The one thing I will give him, he's a genius at gaslighting, right? Because he will commit the crime right in front of you. It's like the emperor wears new clothes, and then make you think like you're crazy when you call him out on what he's doing. So I don't think a lot of people understand, and this is, if anything, 2020 has taught us, it's not just about being woke, it's about staying woke and really getting involved in your community, going out there and protesting and voting all the way top to bottom, not just for president, but who's representing you on a local level, because that's really who not only can you possibly have tacos with, but who's actually gonna be the one that's in charge of, you know, the potholes or getting into investigations and looking into holding people accountable, right? And looking at our judges. And so I love, Kim, that you're speaking about that. And I love the concept. How can people support this campaign that you all are doing?
So you can follow us online. We have a bunch of events. We'll be participating in the Women's March on October 17th. We'll be doing rallies. We're also doing a lot of virtual engagement. You guys should follow us on Twitter, Instagram. We're at Sister SCOTUS. Or you can visit us online, www.sisterscotus.org, that lists out all of our upcoming events and conversations that we're going to be having. But really, like, we just want folks to engage with us, share with us what it means to you to see this first Black woman. I mean, and I need y'all to understand how important seeing women of color on that court is. Like, Justice Sotomayor, she shouted out Black Lives Matter in a Supreme Court decision. y'all is big, right?
Yeah.
And I remember reading that dissent and feeling seen, right? Like to see my brown sister, you know what I'm saying? But it is important, y'all. And I just, you know, I just need us to really understand how important this moment is and like just how much is at stake for us.
I love that. Now, Jullian, speaking on feeling seen, one of the things that we know is that people turn often to music to really deal with the discomfort, if you will, of the movement sometimes, right? And really trying to feel better and being like, oh my God, the world is turning upside down. Let me like get into my vibe. Let me really just sit in that. And so music is such a healing source. But what we've also seen during this time, and we've seen it from content creators, but also from many musicians who are refusing to even use their voice to speak up and against police brutality. So I would love your thoughts on that, onto why, just like the ladies have spoken, it's so important for us in the creative community to also really hold space for that. Because what I've heard is some say, well, it's not really on brand. I'm like, humanity isn't on brand for you? Like, I don't quite understand that. So as a musician, as an artist, as a creative, I would love your take as to why you might be inspired to even double down in this time as opposed to retreat.
You know, I definitely think it has to do with just my journey. When we first released our first song, you know, it was one of those things, like I literally was just out of college. I went to school as a dance major. I wanted to be a professional dancer. The song came out, and then, you know, at that time it was like World Star. If you like, I was like, how are we on World Star? Like, what is happening? And next thing you know, we're getting all these emails from like major labels. And so I was going into these meetings like very preemptively, like, you know, one song under my belt, not much experience, definitely not even trying to talk to my mom and dad, who were both, you know, very skilled within the music industry, because I had a lot to prove for myself. And I also, you know, I just wanted to meet these people and see, you know, whatever. So I ended up signing with Universal, and I have to say it was a, you know, very formative experience. I learned a lot about the industry. I got to connect with amazing people. But I do feel that was kind of the first, that was the first thing I felt that was kind of limiting me. That was that first weight I felt on my shoulders, was really when it came to issues about talking about my identity, talking about being Black, especially literally my hair, for me really represented that trap they kind of put me in. I usually have really big hair, and it kind of became a thing where I, you know, if I wanted to braid my hair, they didn't want me to braid my hair because they didn't think people would like me this way and this way and this way. So I learned really early on that that's very problematic when you're trying to just express yourself in your authentic form, and especially in those spaces that are literally labels. All they want to do is label you and put you in a box. So, you know, I learned a lot, but I had to leave there. And now as an independent artist, you know, it's a challenge. I think it's reflective of what everyone's doing right now. We don't have all the resources. We don't have all the fire and money behind us, but we have our real voices. We have people that authentically believe in us and relate to us. And, you know, I think that's been the thing that's been able to really open doors to the opportunities I've been able to get. And now I just feel like I don't have any resistance anymore. The people, it was almost like, you know, they literally would, if you say you don't want to do something, they would threaten you. Oh, well, if you choose to do that, well, just to let you know, the record, I don't know if the record's going to come out, or I'm not sure about that feature. So it's like your artistic identity, everything you're doing, it's a lot. They pressure you. And I'm sure that's happening in every business, every situation, for everyone, and especially Black people. And especially when I think of everyone I was ever inspired by, I'm like, that's a Black artist. Like everyone I've ever liked, you know, you said I can curse, fucked with, is Black. So I'm just like, I feel that we, you know, have to be real. We have to be, you know, and I think now more than ever, I am using that. I feel more fired up about it. I think before I was scared. I didn't want, you know, growing up around white people, I know a lot of white people don't mean to be offensive. They don't mean to touch my hair. You know, they don't mean to do those things because they don't know any better. And I don't want to lose them. And obviously I'm an artist that wants to welcome everyone. I want music for everyone. Everyone should be able to listen to everything and be moved. But you have to be able to speak on, you know, for me, I'm like, there's nothing problematic about saying Black trans lives matter. I mean, transparency is what we all need in general. So like, why is that a problem that I believe in their lives just as much as I believe in my own life, you know? And if I'm making music for all people, I have to believe in you know, unity and equality for all people. So it just goes hand in hand. And even now, it's like, it's a challenge. I've been having different things and, you know, doing some partnerships with great companies. And now I know, I'm like, you know, I gotta speak up. I can't really sit in those like big meetings and just say, okay, I'll do it, you know, because I think at the end of the day, you have to feel good about what you're doing. And if it's on your mind and you're not making efforts to change it, you're going to have to sit with that. You know, no one else is going to have to. So I think if you feel it, you know, do something about it. And that's really all you can do, is just try to just do something different each day to kind of move the needle forward.
Yes, I'm always talking about homework for change. I give homework on the daily for people on my Insta. I know Kimberly does it on the weekly as well. And I so appreciate, Jullian, that you were so transparent with that, because I know that it is a struggle and that people wonder, like, well, am I going to lose followers or am I going to lose brand deals? And I am like you, where I'm like, I don't care. Like, I need to be able to hold space for equality. And if that bothers you, then don't follow me then. You weren't meant to connect with me, and that's okay. And I want us to normalize that, because it is sad that labels, I get that it's a money-driven business, but if they also just open their eyes, there are a lot of Black and brown people in this country that will support artists that are keeping it real and supporting one another, as opposed to just pretending that, no, you have to keep everything vanilla and nothing can ever be reactionary and you can't actually use your voice, stay in your quote unquote lane. So I so appreciate you going out on a limb and really re-identifying and remolding what that can look like as an artist. So in that, we've seen a lot of remolding happen this year in what supposedly was going to be justice, and we've been disappointed again. So we've had months and months of protests and online petitions being signed and calls being made and emails and showing up at people's houses. And unfortunately, on the same day, on the anniversary of Emmett Till's decision coming out, we found out as a nation that those who killed Breonna Taylor, the cops responsible, were not going to be charged. That the wall between the apartments got more protection than Breonna did. And that the only reason that even Brett was being charged was for the times he missed, not even for the times he actually shot her, which is just baffles me. And just earlier today, we saw that there was a break in the story. So Kimberly, because I know that this is one of the cases that you've really been working on as well, what went through your mind when you saw this decision?
You know, the first thing that went through my mind, you know, I'm always focused on the through line, how one thing connects to the other. The first thing I thought was, this is another reason why we need to galvanize people to vote. This is another thing that we need to tell people about in terms of how it relates to an actual tangible moment that you can connect it to. Because at the end of the day, one of the things that happens when you vote is that you go on the jury pool. Mm-hmm. That's key, that people don't make that connection, is that you go into the jury pool. And so even with the information that came out today, even with really what we're watching is the unraveling of this case. And props to my sister Tamika Mallory, who has occupied Kentucky trying to get stuff done. And then people have said to her, even after the case came out, you know, it's over now, you lost, get out of there. And she's like, oh no, baby, this just begun. You know, that tenacity is what we need from people, because here's the thing. One person on that jury said, foul, there's shenanigans going on. I'm going to file a complaint. I want this information released to the public. I want the public to have the information that they need. One person is changing the course of this case. And you need to position yourself to be that one person. You need to not only register to vote so you can walk in and vote, but you got to push past the vote, because pushing past the vote puts us in the position that we're in right now, where that one juror is taking what was, to answer your question, a devastating, disgusting, and despicable day, and actually giving us hope that justice is not we have not lost the potential of justice, that there is still potential to see some, that there's going to be some ramifications for the people who have participated in the death of this young woman who was an EMT, who was a hero on the front lines of COVID, assisting people, and lost her life while she was asleep. Due to a warrant that was put together based on white supremacist shenanigans.
And was not even the right house. I mean, there's just so much.
The mail general in that town has said that, like, we told them there was no proof of packages coming to this house. But all of this information that we're getting now, post Daniel Cameron, who I would like the record to reflect, Black people have evicted him from Blackness.
He's not invited to the barbecue or the carne asada. Like, he can't come to the carne asada either.
From him anywhere on this planet, you know what I'm saying? Like, but there's one juror who's changing the course. There's one juror. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I appreciate that you're calling that out, because again, for people at home watching to understand the historic nature of this, these jury recordings being released is unprecedented. And it's only because, like you're mentioning, that juror was like, nah, son, I have a conscience and this ain't gonna be me. This ain't gonna be on us. We weren't the ones that did this. And also, to talk about the sloppiness, and Kim, I think you can speak to this too, and I've seen this again in some of the cases that I've been working on as well, is how they conveniently, as always, leave out key information. So how all these jurors are coming out and saying, oh, we didn't know that we could add these charges to the other officers. Like, we were unaware of that. So again, going back to Monopoly, right? When you don't, and I always say this to people when I'm advocating for my community too, shout out to Love Book Nation, is listen, you have to remember, if you are not ordering from the menu, you're on the menu. So you need to have a seat at the table in order to understand what is happening, so that you can voice, yo, we shouldn't be doing that, or we need to be doing that. And if you notice that no one's paying attention to you, it's because you're actually the one that's being served for dinner, right? So in that case, when I saw that, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me that they aren't even informing them. So Kim, I would love for you to speak on that, to educate people at home on how common that is to be shady about not really, letting people know all the information, and even going so far as to legally lying.
So yeah, welcome to the mysterious, awful world of grand juries, right? Like, the whole way that it's under a veil, you don't know what the hell is going on, and the prosecutor basically is able to build an entire case. Imagine having a case being built against you, but you're not allowed in the room. Your attorney's not allowed in the room, but your opponent is allowed to lay out as much stuff that they want against you, frame up the evidence any way they want, and tell the story any way they want, and then say, so everybody in the room, aren't you in agreement with me? Shouldn't we move forward in the way that I am loading up this information? And again, like, these are all laws, y'all, that are being brought down from the courts. And I just need y'all to understand, like, this man, and when I say this man, it's hard for me to call him president.
I don't call him that. Trump.
This man, say it. Oh wait, I want to hear Kim say it again.
I can't even dignify. My counting skills are going to go from 44 to 46. I can't.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's this dude has reshaped the judiciary, y'all. But this is where rules like this come down. And the grand jury, again, you want to talk about rules and how to set white supremacy built? That's the grand jury. And these are the rules that are meant to keep us out and to keep us disenfranchised. And so when we talk about grand jury reform, police reform, Kim, I love your point about voting, because when you do register to vote, you do enter into the grand jury. You're entered onto those roles. I need my people to show up. I need it for, like, we cannot have our folks coming in into a courtroom and the only Black and brown faces are the defendants. We can't do that, y'all. We can't. And it's just, the other thing that I love is that we have to vote, and it's not going to be cute. Like, I need everybody to mentally prepare for a really awful day. Like, it's going to be hard. It's going to be unpleasant. It's going to be hard. And so I need us all to mentally prepare for long waits.
Do your Palo Santo, like, be ready.
Wear your COVID sweats. Like, I need all of it. But we need to show up, and we need to show up and be ready to be uncomfortable. But we also need to I'm so moved by everything that is happening in Kentucky, because Mitch McConnell is the one who's trying to this man is not going to pass more relief. We're not getting more relief for the pandemic, but what he is about to do is he's about to steamroll this whole Supreme Court process. And I want y'all to understand, right? They're going to make sure that this woman is in place before the election, so that if there's any constitutional issues that have to go before them, and we have like a whole Bush v. Gore moment, they're going to have all of their soldiers in a row to be able to rubber stamp whatever shenanigans happen over the course of the election. So, like, y'all, there's layers. There's layers to it.
Goes back to Monopoly. They're setting it up to make sure they got all the game pieces. And so with that too, like, Jullian, like, for you in your home, what would you say for young, America, if you will, and for those who this is their first time voting or really trying to get involved with being part of police brutality and standing up against it, what would you recommend to them as a good way to dip their toe in?
I mean, I feel, yes, there's value of, you can have an hour on Instagram and go and watch a bunch of videos. You can go watch the Monopoly video. You can watch a lot of informed people give you breakdowns that you actually can take away and really remember, which is, I think, the real way to talk to this generation. We're so like fast, and like everyone, has the shortest attention span. But I will say, especially in this time, because as much as the pandemic is here, people are struggling. But if you are allowed and you are having more time to yourself, like, read a book, really, really do more work. I think that's something that I've had James Baldwin books on my bookshelf for years. I've had,
What books would you recommend that have made an impact for you?
Let's see. I think my favorite book right now, I just read it over the summer, but I had it for a long time, and my best friend gave it to me, and it was Notes of a Native Son. And I was like, especially just with anyone, to be honest, it's like, it's not a comfortable conversation. You don't want to talk about it. So I always have my books about things that are uncomfortable. And I was like, I don't really feel like reading that right now. I don't feel like reading that right now. And then, just when you feel like I actually find comfort now reading those stories, hearing from them, because they're so wise, they're so well spoken, they have such a good understanding of where we are right now and where we've been. I think that's it's disheartening, but it also gives me hope, because I'm like, okay, these people, they've always existed. We've always been here. We've always had resources. We've always been able to articulate our feelings of how this is wrong. And that is the real work, is also just, again, humanizing people, understanding that if you don't understand numbers, if you don't understand policies, like, just try to take in as many stories as you can from people that have lived these lives. And hopefully that will move you to, yes, go and vote, but also talk to your friends about it over dinner, and call your mom, or, even Lucas, and, his dad is Jewish and his mom is Chinese, and they're definitely having different talks about America, which was really interesting to see. And like, they're listening to me in different ways. So I think just everyone, there's people that you could access that probably still have their nose turned, or that are just like, oh, I don't care, or it's not that important, or it doesn't apply to me. So just try to be vocal and talk to people that you think, oh, maybe they don't know. Maybe I should just see what they think about race. Maybe I should see if they're voting or where they are voting, because I think a lot of people, you just assume that they're doing it and they're not,
Yeah, it definitely starts with a question. I've also been telling people we need a lot of volunteers to help at the polls, because normally it's older people that help. And right now, as we know, because of COVID, that really puts them at a big exposure. So I myself have volunteered to be a poll worker. I am trilingual. So anywhere I could be, put to work, I'm like, put me to work. But people can visit powerthepolls.org. They can sign up. And in some states, even they'll get paid. So to your point, it starts with asking little questions, even, are you registered to vote? Can we have that conversation? Or why are you thinking about certain bills in our area? I think that's equally as important. And one of the other things that I also think that is important to learn is to make sure that you're checking who your sources are, because with social media, we're seeing a lot of news be turned into memes that aren't always factual. So make sure that you're doing your fact checking on your end, if you will. And one big thing that I actually want to ask all three of you as we begin to wrap up is the difference between defund the police and abolish the police, because that really has seemed to power those hard right-wing groups to say, like, they are domestic terrorists. They want us to have no police ever. No one is saying that, right? So it's an interesting conversation to have, and I would love for you all to weigh in on how you see the difference and where you stand. Are you more on abolish the police or defund the police? Kimberly, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan of defunding the police. I don't think we need the abolishment of the police, but I think that what we need is a reimagining of the police. So maybe people should change the word to that, and folks will be less triggered, because right now it's just a poor marketing plan that's having a and honestly, marketing is a very strong tool. The marketing campaign to make people fear Black and brown people has been one of the most successful marketing campaigns in American history. You go all the way back to the newspapers back in the day that started the fear mongering of the Black man is coming to rape you at the time in which Black people were coming into some semblance of powers. And so I think that we need to reconstruct defund the police so it has a better, marketing chance at actually having unsuspected allies to join forces. But what people have to recognize is that defunding the police is not about getting rid of the police and not having a police. What it's about is a reallocation of funds back into the communities in which these police officers are in. They have military grade equipment that they don't actually need. If we get to the point where we need military on the ground, that is what we have National Guard for. That is what we have federal troops for. We don't actually need the police to have the same level of equipment. And there's an amazing book that I think people should read by Dr. Cedric Alexander that's called Policing in the 21st Century, that talks about how we moved from a more community policing style to a more militarized style. Even when you look at the uniforms of the police officers, if you go back 50 years and look at the uniforms, it's a much less agile uniform, because you were supposed to be the friendly police officer getting the cat out of the tree. And that's how joining the police force was even advertised and marketed back in those days. And now we advertise people are jumping over cars and coming through a window. And so you're looking for you are attracting by design these people who have aggressive personalities, and so what we're getting is not guardians of the community, which is what we actually deserve. What we're getting is the warrior cop who wants to jump over a building and slash somebody's head off. And so that's who's policing our community. And then when you add in racism, prejudice, implicit bias that exists inside of them, you're going to get the actual worst fireball of combination. And so that's all that defunding the police and reimagining the police is asking people to do, is to reallocate funds back into the community, away from more militarized equipment that they don't need, but also taking a lot of those overages and reinvesting it into the community. And part of that is reinvesting into the training of police officers, because it takes you longer to get a barber's license than it does to become a police officer, which is ridiculous.
Yes, no, you hit it. My mom's a hairdresser and a salon owner, and that's the one thing she always talks about. Like, I had to go to school longer than the person that's going to supposedly pull me over to protect me, and he has a gun drawn. Like, how is this okay, right? And also, the one thing that we're talking about in California is just like if a doctor is killing people, right, and they take his license away, or a lawyer is really just not being up to snuff and taking back end deals, they take his license away. If after a certain amount of times you have aggressive assault on your record as a police officer, you should no longer be a police officer. Like, we really need to go to those measures. And there's some states that actually don't have that on the books, California being one of them, which is a huge issue. Kim, again, going from a legal perspective, especially even with IP, Kimberly brings up a great point of the campaigning, right, and the marketing of defund the police versus abolish the police, which people seem to be so confused. I love Kimberly's suggestion. Do you think it's too late to rebrand it, or what do we do to help people understand what that means so that they're not so triggered on both sides about the meaning?
I mean, so I feel two ways about it. So you're right. Like, I like the term reimagining. I think it is triggering, but quite frankly, the folks who are being triggered, they're just going to be triggered. It's almost as if they want to focus on this term to be able to frame, Black and brown people and the left as these radical, like this radical party that doesn't want any police officers anywhere. And, going back to your whole concept of, they're coming to rape your women. Like, to me, I think that they are determined. There's a certain fraction of this country that's determined to just focus on this and be triggered. It's like they just are asking and want to be triggered. I think that Kim's point on reimagining is a good one, because it is just the entire concept of a police officer, one, is not always the best person to be responding to different situations. So what are we doing to invest in different forms of responses for different types of situations? One. Two, what are we doing to break down these cultures, to reimagine how we are incentivizing police officers, and as opposed to, and I think that this is in a lot of those recommendations that Kim mentioned, right? Is to say, instead of incentivizing you for how many people you're arresting, why are we not incentivizing you to have interactions with the actual community and get to know the community? That's how we should be, that is how we can tell just how effective you're being. And I feel like the final piece of it is what are we doing? How can we invest in communities so that folks are not pipelined into the judicial system, right? What can we do to make it so that you never even need to touch or come in contact with police enforcement in the first place? So again, it's reinvesting in the community in other ways. So again, it's just reimagining what the judicial system can be and what law enforcement could be.
I love that, just reimagining. I mean, if they could figure out how to do contactless sales, then yes, maybe we can figure out how to do contactless, pullovers or some of these other things where it gets escalated way too quickly, and clearly some people are sometimes trigger happy. It would be a really interesting way to see if we can explore things. Jullian, for you, I would love to also again get your viewpoint of where you stand, defund the police versus abolish the police, but also add to that, as you had mentioned, talking about moving the needle forward. Which one will help move the needle forward? But then, how as a community can we move the needle forward for cases that we don't know, or some of the cases that are popping up, like Elijah McClain has popped up, and unfortunately, we're even adding more names because of other recent police incidents.
I would definitely agree with defund the police. I think even when I first saw this saying going around, I was like, oh my God, is this going to scare a lot of people? Not even, I understood from just my own perspective, okay, that's just about fun. Like, I'm like, oh, this makes sense. This is just about not giving them crazy amounts of funds so they don't have to run around basically like they're in the army. I remember when there was lockdown, like East Village around 7 p.m. It's like the cops come out of nowhere and they have their sirens on, and it felt insane. I'm like, why is this happening? I'm walking my dog. What's the point? So I think it's just about really giving them less entitlement to feel that they, have all of this power, and they know they have the power because they have the money, and that money should be going into our schools, and they should be evaluated about their psychological capabilities and their triggers, and if they have anger management, and if they drink. And for me, it's also like my grandfather was a fireman, and I'm like, firemen don't just sit in the truck and drive around all day looking for fires. Like, when they get a call, they get suited up, they go find the fire, they see the physical fire, they go in with their hose, and they save as many people as they can. And they're not even seeing these people because usually there's smoke involved and it's dark, and they have to find a human and take them out of the building. And I feel like that same directive, that same concept should be for the police force. They're there to protect and serve the people, and they should be operating on the situation at hand, not going in looking for brown and black people as targets. Especially like you said, when, I didn't even know when a lot of officers at the end of the month have quotas. So it's actually like a game. They're like, okay, we got this amount of people to go and get, or this amount of tickets. Just that incentive, I think, is so wrong, because it's obviously going to incite violence. It's going to add more people into the system for no reason. And that's why it's just this endless cycle. So I just feel like, I don't know. All you can do is, I think you just have to change everything about them. I think you have to give them less power, make them feel, make it much harder to become an officer. And really, just weapons. I mean, even our gun laws, I think it just all goes together. Like, I think people feel that they can do anything because right now, look at how people who are killing people in mass shootings are being treated. You know, I just feel like it's all together. And yeah, I don't know. They just got to change it all. I don't think it should go away, because in principle, you want to be able to protect people if something bad happens. But it's very hard to sit with it when you know that your people are not being protected by those protectors, you know.
I mean, again, Kimberly and I were like, yes, I love it. Now, you bring up an interesting point, which I also think is super important to discuss as, again, we're winding down here, is a couple of weeks ago, we actually in Los Angeles, and I'm sure you might have seen this, we had 2 police officers who were sitting in their police patrol car, and during that time, they were in Compton. An individual ran up to them and actually shot at them 5 times. As a result, the 2 officers ended up having to go to the hospital, and that actually sparked a lot of anger from those who want to say that Blue Lives Matter, and that became a thing. Is like, oh, see, that's exactly what you want if you defund the police or what have you, is now you want to start going after police officers. And now we've had this opposite outcry from police officers saying that they're scared to go to work, that they're just trying to do their job, and they feel like they can't properly do it. What's interesting to me is that in doing all of that, they were quick. They actually identified who the individual was this week. They arrested him. They arraigned him yesterday, and they want to throw the book at him very quickly. It's very odd to me that they were so quick to move on that. And here in LA, we're still waiting for Andres Guardado. We know who the officer was. The evidence is there. The tape has been shown. The coroner, much like what happened in Breonna Taylor's case, the coroner came forward. The first time ever that this has happened, and actually defied the county sheriff's request to not release the information. And he said the people deserve to know the truth. And he released the autopsy showing that indeed Andres was shot at in the back by police. And it's consistent with the fact that he, was unarmed. And so their stories have it matched up. And yet that officer has not been arrested. He still is at his home. So it's interesting to me how quickly we're seeing them move when they see police violence happen on them. But when it's police brutality in our communities, I mean, we're taking months, years. So I'd be curious to know, and I bring this up because, Kimberly, one thing that you said in your speech that stuck with me is that they should be lucky that we just want equality and we don't want revenge. So what does that look like with this framework if now we have policemen fearing going to their job because people in our community are going after them? Is that too far? Is that a consequence? And where do we go from here?
Well, first of all, I get so irritated when I hear like the Blue Lives Matter people, because blue is not a culture, an ethnicity, or anything. It is a uniform.
T-shirt.
Yeah, it is a T-shirt. It's a uniform color. But like, what are you talking about? But you cannot compare a chosen field to a person's life and the way in which we interact with that person based on that person's humanity for a trait and quality that they are born with that they can't control. I did not get to check in with God before I got here and say, I'd really like to go to one of those Black families. It looks like it's dangerous, but it's lit. That's not what happened. You know what I mean? So it's like at the end of the day, what you have to talk about is this is a chosen field that has a certain level of danger. We have Jullian on here, and you and I, we're all creatives. I'm a writer and a director. That was a chosen field that I knew was a risky field to go into because it didn't have a clear through line of like, I'm going to get this degree and then I'm going to be able to get this entry level position to become a writer. And so that's a choice that I made as a grown ass woman. And those officers are making a choice to become police officers as grown ass people. And if you are that fucking scared, do another job. If you are that fearful, do another job. If you are that easily shook, then do another job. And you're not built for it. I didn't sign up to be a police officer because I don't want to walk into those situations. But you chose this. This is your line of work that you chose. And so you knew all of the potential of what could happen with that job. So now to say that there is some omnipresent, imminent threat to your physical form, then good. Then you know what it's like to be Black in America now. You know what it's like to be indigenous and you're on your own land now, which is what we're looking at. And so I think at the end of the day, like I want to give some scholarly answer to that, but my end of the day for the people who say that is just fuck you.
You said it. I love it. Kim, do you have anything to add, or Jullian?
What do you add to that?
Exactly.
But it's true, right? Exactly what I'm trying to say. Like, oh, you're black and you're racist, or you're being Latin. I'm like, wait, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I so love, Kimberly, that you called it out. It's a uniform. And here's the thing. Yes, we're not asking for people to go shoot police officers. That isn't like our motive that we're waking up. We're just trying to figure out how to survive. And we're trying to get justice for those of the lives that we lost. If officers got shot, well then, maybe you should look at, why are people wanting to shoot at you? Let's explore that, right? Like, what is the root problem? The way that you would look at it in medicine, right? Jullian, any thoughts about that?
I mean, I totally agree. And when you think about these past cases we all just talked about, George Floyd, he wasn't doing anything. Breonna Taylor was literally sleeping. Elijah McClain was walking home. So these people aren't violent. You know, that's the thing. Black people aren't inherently violent. We're not out here trying to like beat everyone up, you know? And I think that fear of, like, even going back about men coming to rape women, that's just the narrative that white supremacy operates on, because that's how they keep us in control. So they make us feel like we're the aggressors so that they have a means to cause violence and keep us in check, you know? So I think just even spreading our stories and showing how loving Black people are, how loving our communities are, and how we really just want freedom to live our lives and just do whatever we want to do uninterrupted. That's really all we're aiming for. And we don't want to spend time in our lives inflicting pain on others, you know, abusing them and thinking that they're less than. That's just, there's no point to that. That's why it's so crazy, because that's really the sickness and the core of what it's all happening. You know, white people are being enabled, and this whole idea is just like, it's accepted that this has happened and that it's okay, and it's just not okay. So I think we just have to, it's all about Black love. That's what I want to do, is to spread more love, and we can do it by voting, because voting is a loving act, and it's for the people that came before us and that have, you know, that's what they want for us, and that's what we want for our generations to come, is more love.
What a beautiful way for us to end. Ladies, I want to thank you all so much for being here, imparting. Do any of you have any words to encourage those at home, to keep this fight? Because I do know that it gets a little frustrating and disappointing, right? When you hear verdicts like what happened with Breonna, or when we see the stagnant cases not moving forward. We're still waiting to see what's going to happen with Ahmaud Arbery. Same thing even with Rayshard Brooks, where you're at in Atlanta. So is there any pieces of advice that you would give to people before we sign off?
Vote.
I would say make sure that if you are creating an organization in which you're trying to tackle these issues, that you have a multi-tiered plan. That, one of the things that we need to talk about when we're talking about misbehaving officers is, one of the key things that we need to take away is their pension. They should not be continuing to receive a pension that's actually coming from the tax dollars, coming from the community in which they have brutalized. These are the type of things that we have to see, because if you know that you can shoot a Black person, get away with it, still keep your job, still keep your pension, and you have your president dog whistling, talking about stand down and stand by when you're doing your side gig of being part of the Proud Boys, when you're in the, your blue uniform during the day, then why would you stop? Why would you hesitate? Why would you, in the midst of a civil unrest, like what would happen with Rayshard Brooks, think twice about shooting someone in the back, even in the most turmoil and most like upheaval of a climate? And so what we have to do when we're talking about dismantling the white supremacy delusion that exists in the police department is dismantling it from every inch in which it has backup. Because again, white supremacy is supported by a system that supports it, which is why it has been so successful. So when we decide that we're going to tackle this, we need to look at not only at the police departments, but the police unions, the people who manage the police pensions, the banks that have all of these contracts in order to pay out these death sentences. And we need to dismantle the entire thing. And that's if you got a big plan. If you got a little bit of plan, what I'll say to you is do some self-work first, because especially I'm going to say this to our allies who want to be in this fight. The first thing you need to do is listen and understand what the people you are wanting to support, what they need, and understand that it's not your responsibility to take the lead on the charge on their fight, but that it's actually to listen and to be of support. And the best thing you can do is to be on support, is to go ahead and do the work to grapple with your own implicit bias, and that way you can be more useful.
Oh my gosh, moved my soul. Kim?
I would say I'm going to go ahead and add to Kim's part of folks who have a little bit of a plan, but not a fully cooked one, is look to the left and right and see who else is already doing this work, right? I mean, like to Jillian's point where she reached out to LDF, NAACP, there's folks that are on the ground that are doing this work as well. And it's a great way to help you see what your unique role could be in the movement. But it's also, important for us to figure out ways for us to plug in and support folks. So, and I think that is an important message for our allies, is to not necessarily feel compelled to take a lead, but instead go ahead and take a step back and look to your left and right and see what the folks who are already doing the work, how you can support that.
That is fabulous. I think it is. It's building, right? That homework for change, because I always say there's so many homework assignments in this bigger assignment that we have to move the needle forward, and they're not always going to look the same, and that's okay. So I really love building on one another. Jillian, thoughts?
I feel, I don't know. I feel like I've said everything, and you guys were just so articulate, and I feel, I don't know. I just feel like I'm tapped out.
No, you feel full. It's been great. I want to say, just a reminder to everyone watching again, because the police is there. Yes, we do want to respect the police, but at the same time, a badge does not give them the right to be judge, juror, and prosecutor and take it all out on everyone at once. I think that is the one thing that we've really lost along the way, is remembering what a police officer's duty is. And Kimberly, I think, really mentioned it so well in terms of the fact of even just how the image has changed from then to now. So I did want to sign off. However, something did come up. And because I know Kimberly never stands down from a good argument, I did want to put it up on the screen. I thought this would be a fire way for us to end, because apparently some people want to learn today. So, ladies, Benjamin Montoya says, okay, let me get this straight. I'm a drug dealer. My girl's sitting next to me in my house. Cops come knock on the door. I shoot at the cops through the door. The cops shoot back and kill me. And you guys are saying that this is racial injustice. I would think that you shouldn't be shooting at the cops through the door. Oh, Benjamin Montoya. So the colorism is real. The reading wrong information is real. But I did just want to give you all an insight, because this is a perfect example of where people jump to conclusions and don't actually know all the facts. And Kimberly, I just didn't know if there was a way that you wanted to educate a brother today.
Well, I said the first thing is, one of the things that we have to dismantle is no-knock warrants. That is an absolutely ridiculous system that we have in place. To be able, I am a gun owner. If someone walks in that door right now, if I get to my gun before they get to me, I'm shooting them. That is my right as an American citizen in order to protect myself. And that is the issue with no-knock warrants. People say, oh, well, that's the law. Well, guess what? Slavery was also the law. So not every law that's on the book is a law that we should abide by, adhere to, or not push against. There have been lots and lots of laws that were on the book that we had to get rid of because of the fact that they were rooted in systemic racism and they have an issue. Now, my second point to that is most of what the gentleman said is misinformation. So what I would advise him to do before he decides to pick a fight is actually not listen to the pundits that give him the information that he continues to want to hear, that feeds his own narrative. But what I would actually advise you to do is to go pull the records, because if you're going to have the balls to come on here and say this, you better have the intellect to back it up, to know how to pull the correct information, the court cases, everything that has happened to back up what you say, because otherwise what you come off as is an ignorant douchebag who has decided that this is your moment in the sun, but you won't get it here, honey. Not with these 4 strong women. Educate thyself before you speak.
There you go. There you go. You wanted to be seen, Benjamin. We saw you and we spread some truth. So I hope you learn and this inspires you next time to check yourself before you wreck yourself. To everyone else that's been watching, please know that we appreciate you. Share this stream with someone else. La Lucha Sigue. A big shout out to Jillian, to Kimberly, and to Kim for joining me today. And make sure you all stay tuned, because we will be back with another episode of Conciencia Talk in 2 weeks on October 16th. All right, y'all, we'll see you soon. Thank you. We appreciate you. We see you. And just remember to stand strong and register to vote if you haven't already. Yes.